Ray Bradbury's fifth book is his most famous, Fahrenheit 451. But when it first appeared, it was not a novel. Bradbury's first 4 books were short story collections: Dark Carnival, The Martian Chronicles, which looked like a novel but was really a collection, The Illustrated Man, and The Golden Apples of the Sun. Then, in 1953, came Fahrenheit 451, now his most famous work. Unusually, Fahrenheit 451 was published by Ballantine simultaneously in both hardcover and paperback. Both editions of the book refer to wonderful stories. Note that word, stories. This first version of Fahrenheit 451 was not a novel, it was a collection. Fahrenheit 451 was in there, but so were 2 other stories, The Playground and the Rock Cried Out. The book came out in October 1953, but we can trace the exact origin of Fahrenheit to a point 3 years earlier. In the summer of 1950, Ray Bradbury completed his manuscript long after midnight. This was the first version of Fahrenheit. After some editing and rewriting, Long After Midnight was retitled. Bradbury saved the title, Long After Midnight, and would use it years later for an unrelated story and book. But this story was renamed The Fireman, and was soon published as The Fireman in Galaxy Science Fiction magazine. It got the cover of the magazine, although the illustration is some random spaceship thing that has nothing at all to do with the story. This story, The Fireman, was a novella, somewhat longer than a short story, somewhat shorter than a novel. But this version, The Fireman, really is Fahrenheit 451. It's very recognisable. Largely the same characters, the same situations. Fireman Montag burns books for a living. If you want to know more about the prehistory of Fahrenheit 451, there are 2 books you could turn to. Match to Flame was a limited edition from Gauntlet that collected a number of precursors to Fahrenheit, aiming to prove the point that the ideas in Fahrenheit had been bouncing around in Bradbury's mind for about a decade. Match to Flame also contains essays about this prehistory and a few facsimile manuscripts from Bradbury's papers. The other book presenting the prehistory of Fahrenheit is A Pleasure to Burn, subtitled Fahrenheit 451 Stories. This is more of a mainstream version of the same book. It leaves out the essays, leaves out the facsimiles, and simply collects the stories, the ones that served as precursors to Fahrenheit. To get from The Fireman to Fahrenheit 451 took Bradbury about 2 years. He wrote and rewrote, almost doubling the length of his novella. The Fireman amounted to about 24,000 words. Fahrenheit 451 only just pushed into the novel territory with a word count of about 46,000. Anything over 40,000 is usually classed as a novel, but at 46,000 words, this is really a very short novel. And so, when Fahrenheit 451 was first published in a book, it was accompanied by 2 other stories, put there to bring up the page count. Fahrenheit 46,000 words, The Playground 5,200, and the Rock Cried Out 8,300 words. The Playground was completely new to American readers, but British readers saw it the year before as one of the stories in the British edition of The Illustrated Man. In the US, The Playground turned up in Esquire men's magazine in October 1953, simultaneously with its appearance in Fahrenheit 451. It's the story of a man who constantly worries about his young son being bullied. He eventually swaps places with the boy through some kind of magical body transference, and so the father takes on the position of victim in order to protect the child. And the Rock Cried Out is one of Bradbury's post-apocalyptic tales. It first appeared in Manhunt, an unusual place for such a story. It's set in South America in the near future, just after a global nuclear war. It explores not just post-apocalypse, but post-colonialism. In 1954, the UK edition of Fahrenheit 451 appeared. Unlike the American edition, this one was a novel. Those additional shorter stories were not included. And that's been true of nearly every edition of Fahrenheit 451 since then. The early versions from Ballantine were really collections, but later editions and reprints left out the additional stories, allowing Fahrenheit 451 to stand alone as a novel. Of course, over the years, Fahrenheit was adapted to every medium imaginable. There was a 1966 film version and a 21st century film version from HBO. There was a stage play from Bradbury, a computer game, and several radio drama adaptations. The version of Fahrenheit which is easiest to get hold of today is the 60th anniversary edition, which contains not only the novel itself, but also some essays and articles on the history of the book. And now that Fahrenheit is approaching its 70th anniversary, let's celebrate it as a short novel.